And on that most dour day, June 3rd, 2004, or possibly June 6th, depending on who you ask, the great warrior, the mighty Quorthon, he didst fall. And the very foundations of Asgard did shake with the profound force of his ascension to the hallowed halls of Valhalla. But though the warrior would linger no more in this pathetic mortal realm, his legacy, the inextinguishable legacy of Bathory, would become as to a glowing flame which would burn within the hearts of all. Would that they just be brave enough to listen, to listen, to listen. Professor McKeever. J to the M to the motherfucking shiznatch. Welcome to Heavy Metal Summer School. We, my good friend, have attended to some important business over the years on this podcast. We have done things. Real, serious things. Would you agree, John, that to date, we've done some things?
We have done things.
All right. Indeedy. But I'm honestly not sure if anything we've done to date here on Heavy Metal 101 is quite so important as the task at hand. For today, we shall be digging deeply into the history and music of one of the most consequential, challenging, inspirational, and enigmatic figures in all of heavy metal. For today, John, we discuss Quorthon and his magnificent revolutionary musical project, Bathory. J-Rock! We finally get to devote an entire episode to the life and times of Bathory. Is this not the single most important thing you've ever been involved with in your entire freaking life?
It is not.
Top 10?
You
think about it. Think about it. Maybe I can convince you otherwise over the course of today's episode. We'll see.
We will see.
All right. Now, before I go getting too excited and stuff, some credit where some credit is due. This episode is the direct result of a Patreon fan request. Extra special thanks to Patreon member Quorthon100, aka Kenichiwa Jeffrey McDusty, aka Ken, who took advantage of the Patreon episode topic request feature and requested this magnificently fucking special episode topic. John, were you aware of the fact that aside from monthly exclusive content, Patreon members have the opportunity to request the future Heavy Metal 101 episode topic of their choice?
Eric, just like I don't actually listen to our podcast, I do not also subscribe to the Patreon, so I have no idea what is happening over there.
You should subscribe and request an episode topic.
I bet my request would be denied.
That is entirely possible. But meanwhile, we've got a whole hell of a lot to get to, so I think we best get to getting. John, are you ready to dip your metaphorical balls into a whole big bunch of satanic/Viking metal goodness?
Oh, sure.
Alrighty. Pack your Sverigedrakten, good buddy, because Heavy Metal 101 is off to Sweden, to Sweden, to Sweden.
Part 1. Thomas Børge Forsberg.
Once upon a time, well, more specifically, on February 17th, 1966, a wee innocent child, soon to be christened Thomas, was born unto this world in Stockholm. And, he had a dad. His dad was named Børge Forsberg. We know he eventually had a younger sister, Jenny. We also know that he, like all right-thinking young lads, grew to love the band Kiss a whole lot, and that when he got his first instrument, a drum kit purchased for him at the age of 10, his favorite thing to play along with was Peter Criss's epic Alive drum solo.
Yeah.
We know that. We also know that he also began to play piano at around this same time and formed a Kiss cover band with his friends. Now, John, you and I are friends. Would you ever consider forming a Kiss cover band with me?
Would you require us to do the makeup?
It wouldn't be a requirement, but I think it'd be nice.
I don't know that I can commit to the makeup.
You suck!
Now, we're also fairly certain that at the tender age of 14, young Thomas either chose or was forced to leave his full-time schooling, entering a Swedish youth labor program by which he was able to earn school credits by working at the record label Typhon Gramophone, which, it so happened, was owned by his aforementioned father, Börje. Also, at approximately age 14, he started to learn to play the guitar. We know these things. Or at least we're pretty sure we do. But John,
Yes, Eric?
despite my rigorous research, including reading an entire book about this very same Thomas Börje Forsberg, and also multiple other books with large sections prominently featuring him and his band, it would seem that the above is just about all that anyone knows about the man who would become Quorthon's early life. One does assume that a woman gave birth to him at some point, though we're not entirely sure who she was, and it appears he probably had one or more brothers who may or may not have occasionally made music with him. But fuck me if we aren't going to be dealing with some very sketchy biographical details today. John, will you hold me close in your warm embrace as I attempt to struggle my way through piecing together the story of Bathory and Quorthon, despite the wildly limited amount of available information?
Could I propose an alternate plan?
Ooh, this ought to be good.
What if we just didn't do that and we simply talked about what we know, which would be what the music sounds like?
Fuck you! You're no fun. Alrighty then. Let's try this whole thing one more time.
Part 1A. A young man named Quorthon.
We open on the gritty streets of Stockholm at the dawn of the 1980s, where a handsome, long-haired, gangly teenager
Note, the adult Quorthon stood an impressive 6'6"
roamed freely, trying, as one does, to forge his unique path through life. He was a drummer, guitarist, and bassist, and had played bass for a local punk band called Skrydskuk. His musical influences included a mix of punk bands, including GBH and The Exploited, metal bands, including Black Sabbath and Motorhead, and a diverse assortment of other artists, including, of course, Kiss, but also Queen, Kate Bush, The Beatles, and classical music, including music by J.S. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and Wagner, and much, much more. Said young man wasn't Quorthon quite yet, but he was no longer Thomas. At the time, our hero was known to his friends as Ace Shoot. John, what do you think of the nickname Ace Shoot?
I mean, there are worse nicknames you could have. It's long for a nickname, though. Like, were they out there going, "Hey, look, it's Ace Shoot"?
Yeah, it seems to me they called him Ace more than Ace Shoot. I'm not sure how often they used the entire honorific.
So you gotta have a nickname for your nickname?
Yes. For the record, it was two Motorhead songs from which this name was derived, Ace of Spades, and the classic bomber track, Sharpshooter. Now, before we get much further, I want to more clearly contextualize this discussion via delving into everyone's favorite occasional HM101 feature, the oral footnote. I call this particular oral footnote Quorthon the Enigma. John, could you do me a solid and read said footnote into the permanent record?
Quorthon the Enigma. Quorthon lived his entire public life in the shadows. Aside from the very earliest pre-album days of the band, Bathory never performed live. For many years, almost no photos of him were publicly available. And when Quorthon did do interviews with the press, he would often tell lies. Simple facts, his real name, his relationship to the equally enigmatic boss, who ran his band's label and co-produced most of Bathory's albums, whether Bathory was a band or a solo project, and so much more. The truth about some of these details didn't come out for many years. Some of it came after his death, and some of it is still shrouded in mystery and supposition.
Just like my good pal John, Quorthon is a tough nut to crack. An endlessly fascinating, genuinely brilliant figure, but someone whose personal and professional history are not easily accessed. And yet, still we persevere. John, we are here persevering. Now, isn't that great?
I suppose, if we must.
And indeed we must. It's a Patreon request. We got to.
We do it for the patrons.
We do indeed. Aside from Ace Shoot, other names Quorthon is supposed to have used at one time or another include the somewhat problematic Black Spade, the just plain dumb Ace Spunky, and the rather out of left field Ditch Brody.
Why are they all long?
This is part of the enigma, I told you. He's like a mystery wrapped in an enigma. But praise Satan, he eventually settled upon Quorthon, which was the name of a demon from the 1974 book Musta Magia y Osa. That's Black Magic Part 1 to you and me. By an exceedingly bug-eyed Finnish occultist and neo-Nazi named Peter Sitoin. John, a quick aside to note that we here at HM 101 say fuck all neo-Nazis right in the ear, no?
Yeah, fuck those guys.
Yeah. Dubious literary inspirations aside, Quorthon, in all his glory, is now, at long last, with us.
Yes! 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 Yes!
He is arrived. And with Quorthon, of course, must come Bathory.
Part 2. The Formation of Bathory.
The band that would become Bathory first assembled in its earliest configuration in Vällingby, a suburb of Stockholm, in March of 1983. The young Quorthon had responded to an ad soliciting the services of an electric guitarist, which had been posted by the cousins Fredrik Melander, aka Hanoi, and Jonas Ackerlund, who would take on a somewhat questionable nom de plume of his own, Vans McBurger. John, you and I do not agree on a lot of things. However, can we agree that Vans McBurger isn't a very good heavy metal name?
It might not be a great heavy metal name, but it is a great name. I'm picturing some sort of like late 70s, early 80s McDonald's commercial with a burger that's wearing Vans shoes, just sort of like skateboarding down a street.
Actually, I've got a fun fact about Mr. McBurger. Jonas Ackerlund would eventually find international acclaim, not as a musician, but rather as a filmmaker and music video director, and would one day win a Grammy for directing Madonna's Ray of Light video. That's not too shabby for the man with arguably the stupidest heavy metal alias of all time, no?
Well, he clearly just was not destined for the field.
I think that's fair. Anywho, the trio's first stab at a name was die-cast, but Quorthon had other ideas. Depending on who it is doing the telling, the name Bathory was either inspired by the Venom song, Countess Bathory, or Quorthon came up with it following a visit to the London Dungeon, a UK haunted attraction that included a Countess Bathory exhibit. Okay, John, I'm now going to need 2 consecutive footnotes from you. Do the thing!
1. A footnote on Venom's influence, or lack thereof, on Bathory. Quorthon generally never had any particular issues with crediting his musical influences. However, for reasons known only to him, he often vehemently denied Venom's having had any influence on Bathory. He frequently claimed not to have heard Venom's music until after the release of Bathory's debut. This seems unlikely, and in 1987 he did tell Metal Forces magazine that he actually first heard Venom's legendary black metal album just 3 months after the formation of Bathory, well before the release of their eponymous debut. 2. The Countess Elizabeth Bathory was a Hungarian noblewoman who lived from 1560 to 1614. She was accused of murdering countless young women and of bathing in their blood in an effort to retain her youthful beauty. While this almost certainly did not actually happen, it does make for a hell of a good heavy metal band name.
Footnotes make me happy, John. Great work. Quorthon was often cagey about weird shit, and the Venom thing is definitely an example of that. One of the few people who isn't terribly cagey about things from within the Bathory orbit is the aforementioned Jonas Ackerlund. So let's allow him to tell us a bit about Bathory's formative moments.
Me and my cousin Friedrich, who played the bass, were looking for a guitarist and a singer, so we put an advert in our local music store and he saw it. Literally the first time we met him, we saw this guy with the chicken bones hanging from his neck. He had ballet tights on, kind of pink and black striped. Me and Friedrich were like, oh man, I hope it's not that guy. But when we started playing, we were blown away. Ace was such an amazing musician.
That was incredible, John. That was magic. That was celluloid magic.
It felt bad. I don't like doing it.
But it was really good. I hear he sounds kind of like that. I've listened to interviews with him. It's not far off. People might just think it's him.
Oh no!
And so, we've got the first iteration of the band together. Huzzah! Following a formative stint honing their craft playing covers, the trio began to work on some Motorhead-esque originals that Quorthon had composed. While they weren't yet especially musically innovative, Bathory's lyrics, inspired by Quorthon's nascent interests in Satanism, the occult, horror comics, and B-movies, were about as edgy as anything anyone was writing at that time.
I ride the flame, you take the pain. I'll rise the dead. Black metal is here again. It's the return of the darkness and evil. It's the return of the fire and flame. It's the return of my master Satan. It's the return of the soul-burning pain.
You know, you might not have loved Bathory's music, but I really feel like this art is bringing out the best in you, John.
Listen, I've been told more times that I make a good devil than I have a good conductor.
There you go. Can it be both?
I mean, many would argue one and the same.
Indeed. Also particularly provocative was Quorthon's unique vocal approach. Harsh, raspy shrieks and screams, which were considerably more extreme than anything else on the scene in 1983. But nobody cares about extreme world-changing music being played in some teenager's dank, stinky basement. This music needed to get to the people. But how, John? How? It would seem that only an act of great Satan himself could get Bathory's lo-fi, terrifying musical idiom out to the listening public. Fortunately, Satan heard their black prayers, and a big break was on the horizon.
Part 3, Scandinavian Metal Attack.
As 1983 neared its end, Boss's Typhon Gramophone label was busily assembling a compilation album which would feature songs by various Scandinavian metal bands. At the last minute, one of those bands pulled out, leaving a hole that needed to be filled. And it was Bathory who would step forward to fill that hole. That compilation, entitled Scandinavian Metal Attack, was released on January 19, 1984. It included the bands Oz, Trash, Spitfire, 09, and, of course, Bathory, who provided two songs, Sacrifice and The Return of the Darkness and Evil. Spoiler alert, these would actually prove to be the only existing recordings to feature the original lineup of Bathory. But they are absolutely great. The original lineup killed it. For the record, the whole compilation is a lot of fun, but the Bathory tracks are certainly the standouts. So much so, in fact, that after the album was released, the label was inundated with fan mail clamoring for more Bathory. Now, we can't possibly move any further without providing the chance for our beloved listeners to hear what the original lineup of Bathory sounded like on this, the band's first professional recording. One of my very favorite Bathory tracks is the Stone classic Sacrifice, which I have previously played in its more well-known later iteration from the full-length debut album on a prior HM101 episode. John, you weren't there for that one. It was a Halloween episode in the early days. However, I think the early version found on Scandinavian Metal Attack is also fucking great, genuinely illuminating, and well worth a listen. So let's do that. Dear listener, pause the show, click the link, and welcome. darling, to my sacrifice. How did you like Sacrifice?
I don't inherently dislike anything about the instrumental side of it. The singing can fuck right off. No reason for that to exist at all. Hate it passionately. But it doesn't do anything. It's like that same riff for 4 minutes.
Yeah, it's like punk. Crust punk, as they say.
Yeah, but punk songs are about 1.5 minutes long.
Not when they're Bathory songs.
Well,
So not your jam.
not my jam.
Fuck you!
Part 4. Black Metal Bathory. Album the First. Bathory, the eponymous debut.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Following Bathory's success on the Scandinavian Metal Attack compilation, Typhon Gramophone wasted no time in getting Bathory back into the studio to record a full-length debut. Now, despite this being one of the all-time great debuts in heavy metal history, I don't want to spend much time on this album today, as this is ground that has already been covered on a prior episode. Instead, I will ask John to, quickly and concisely, read through the following list of 5 things everyone should know about Bathory's self-titled debut.
Number 1. The album, released on October 2nd, 1984, is considered by many, including Eric, to be the very first true black metal album. Number 2. Our beloved Hanoi and Vans McBurger, having decided that the music of Bathory was too extreme and that Quorthon was too hermetic and idiosyncratic to be an effective frontman, had departed the band shortly after the release of Scandinavian Metal Attack. As such, Quorthon was forced to put together a new lineup for the recording, consisting of bassist Rickard Bergman, who had previously played on Bathory's demo recording, and drummer Stefan Larsson. This new lineup had just one rehearsal prior to recording the album. Number 3. The band began recording on June 14th, 1984 in a converted garage they dubbed Heaven Shore Studio in Stockholm. Number 4. The recording was completed in around 56 hours for approximately $700. Both the guitar and bass were recorded on the same 20-watt amplifier. The drum set consisted of just a bass drum, snare, hi-hat, and one cymbal. Number 5. The iconic cover image, a red-eyed goat, was taken from an illustration by Joseph A. Smith from the book Witches by Erica Young. In the first 1,000 pressings of the album, the goat was yellow, which Quorthon hated. Thereafter, the goat was switched to black and white.
Great stuff, Dr. J! Before we move on, one last bonus fact. Typhon created a special imprint specifically for Bathory releases called Black Mark. The catalog number for the debut album was 666-1.
A brief aside on playing live.
Well, Bathory, famously, never played live after a few informal, very early shows. It is interesting to note that at around this time, Quorthon placed an ad in an effort to find musicians interested in playing for, quote, a big black metal band with the possibility of touring Europe and the United States. End quote. Said musicians should possess the following attributes, quote, long hair, interested in the occult, must use studs, and be dedicated to playing fast and ultra-aggressive metal music with satanic lyrics. John, you famously use studs for all kinds of things. You would have been perfect for this, no?
I was genuinely going to ask, what does that mean?
Like leather coat with the metal studs?
Yeah, sure, but must use them?
Yeah. You know, for studying things. You know how it goes.
So you don't understand that part either. Great.
I told you, he's very enigmatic.
Sure. Let's describe it as that.
Great. Alas, a touring lineup never came to fruition, but clearly this was something that was still under consideration at this early stage of Bathory's career.
Album the Second. The Return of the Darkness and Evil.
You know, sometimes a band comes out of the gate with a great, insanely intense, wild debut. And when it comes time to make a second album, they decide to play it just a bit safe. They've tasted success, and as a result have lost something of their edge. This was most definitely not the case on Bathory's sophomore album. Fun fact, Kerrang! Magazine once referred to the return as, quote, the most evil record ever recorded. John, could anything be more enticing than the possibility of checking out the most evil album ever recorded?
I mean, I'm a little intrigued as to how music could be evil, but I suspect in the end we'll all be disappointed.
Fuck you!
Not all of us, John. Not all of us. I, for one, am certainly enticed. Said evil was spewed out upon the world on May 27, 1985. Drummer Stefan Larsson returned for this recording, but a new bassist, Andreas Johansson, was hired. However, in what will become a familiar pattern, Johansson was fired pretty early into the process, and most of the bass would end up being recorded by Quorthon. Ooh, John, I've got another fun quote about this album. Our old friend Fenriz from the band Darkthrone once referred to it as, quote, the essence of black metal. I provided a taste of that very essence on your playlist via the stupendous title track. Did you find it to be delicious?
I hate the singing. Like, it's atrocious, and I can't stand it. The instrumental part of it, it's just sort of like fast, thrashy metal. It's fine. It's not particularly remarkable. It's not upsetting.
So you're a fan, is what you're saying?
No, because for me to be a fan, the vocals would had to have not have been present on the track. Were that the case? Perhaps. But unfortunately, the vocals were there.
All right. Well, I knew going in that the vocals would be something of a barrier of entry. Both the clean and the not clean version of Quorthon singing are not John-friendly, I would say. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Now, I, on the other hand, it should come as no surprise to anyone, I absolutely fucking love this album. But I will freely admit, it's not the easiest Bathory album to cuddle up with. This particular iteration is very noisy, chaotic, and fairly ugly. Like John's sex tape. Ah!
Wow. Wow.
I apologize. I'm a jerk. Anyhow, like its predecessor, The Return was produced by Quorthon and Boss. But unlike the debut, this time they actually recorded in an honest-to-goodness, real professional studio. Elektra Studio in Stockholm. And yet, despite this, it is, if anything, even more gnarly and lo-fi than the debut was. Huevos. That's what this album has. Big fucking huevos. The return of darkness and evil doesn't want to be your friend, John. It wants to swallow your soul. And that's pretty cool, right?
If you're going to do a thing, you should commit to it all the way.
Now, I skipped a listening break for the debut album because we did one for that album on a prior episode. But this bad boy definitely requires a listen. So let's sink ourselves into the fetid mire with Quorthon and Co. and check out that very title track, The Return of Darkness and Evil. Pause the podcast, click the link, and John and I will be back on the other side to finish up the brilliant black metal trilogy of albums with which Bathory began their recording career.
A second and final brief aside on playing live.
Never did Bathory come closer to touring than in late 1985, when a package that was to include Destruction, Celtic Frost, Possessed, and Bathory was almost put together. Quorthon, once again, and for the last time, started making serious overtures towards putting together a touring lineup. Alas, it all fell apart, and the tour never happened. Sigh.
Album the third. Under the Sign of the Black Mark.
Fuck yeah! Those first two albums are magnificent. But Bathory took a great leap forward with album number 3, which was released on May 11, 1987. Quorthon was joined by a wholly new supporting musical cast this time around, including drummer Paul Lundberg and bassist Krister Sandström. However, once again he would find himself at odds with the bass player shortly into the recording process, and Sandström was fired, leaving Quorthon, once again, to play most of the bass parts. Under the Sign of the Black Mark is a brilliant early black metal album. The seminal early masterpiece of the genre, really. But even still, we get the first stirrings here of a wholly new musical approach on the horizon via the nascent Viking metal of the brilliant Enter the Eternal Fire. John, I didn't want to overwhelm your delicate palate. So sadly, I just put Bathory's tribute to their namesake, Woman of Dark Desires, onto your playlist. There could have been so much more. Still, what did you think of a Bathory on the very cusp of peak awesomeness?
Pretty much same feedback for every song on this until we get to the last few. So an issue I start to have as this whole playlist progresses is that their songs don't really develop. They are weirdly vocally driven for a vocal that is completely unintelligible.
They're ballads. Quorthon is a balladeer, and I don't mean ballad in the like schmaltzy AM radio. Yeah, they're storytelling songs with lengthy verses that repeat.
Right. So that's problematic when you can't understand a fucking word the guy is saying. You get stuck with just sort of and the same driving fucking guitar and drum shit for 4 minutes, which is not necessarily bad guitar and drum shit, but when it doesn't do anything for 4 minutes, it's like, okay, I've listened to the same 10-second loop for 4 minutes now. I'm very bored.
So you're a fan, you'd say?
God damn it.
I'm going to break you. I'm going to break you this episode. The music herein, it's unfucking believably great. But this is an album cover that merits real discussion. And that sort of discussion can only happen by taking the form of yet another installment of everyone's favorite HM101 segment. John looks at shit and tells us all about it on a podcast. Yay!
All right.
John, please take a close look at the legendary cover to Bathory's third album and tell us what you see.
All right, so there's something I want to talk about before we dive into this, and that's the font.
Oh, yeah, it's a classic.
The font is that sort of like a over-elaborate, old-timey English script, and as is often the case, it doesn't look like the letters, so this looks like Batlord.
Batlord.
Like that, when I look at this, I see Batlord. If I did not know that this was a Bathory album, I would assume this is Batlord.
Now, see, this is why I have you do this sort of thing. Now that you're saying it, I see it. I'm not going to deny it. I've never seen it before. It took you pointing it out to make that apparent, but thank you for giving me a new perspective.
So on the Batlord album cover, what we see is what looks like an old-timey opera stage or like an old-timey film stage where it was clearly constructed out of like just cheap materials and in a couple of different pieces. There is sort of like a rock cliff face upon which I can only assume the Batlord is standing. And the Batlord kind of looks like Predator, but with horns and human skin.
Batlord. Well, you're actually very, very close to the truth here. You got a lot of good detail. This is why this segment has become so internationally renowned, John, because of the insight and clarity that you bring to the task at hand. Now, the story behind the cover, it's actually pretty cool. It is not, as many would assume, I had assumed this, it sounds like you didn't. It's not a painting. It's actually a photograph. Could you tell it was a photograph?
I couldn't tell it was a photograph, but that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's a photograph that was taken by photographer Gunnar Sillens during, you'll like this, the intermission of a production of the opera Carmen at the Royal Swedish Opera.
Ah!
Yeah, look at you. John knows his opera stages. particularly the low-rent ones. It was taken while the curtain was down during intermission. The man in the goat mask was Swedish bodybuilder Leif Ernborg. Now, John, I'll bet that you were not expecting that Swedish opera was complicit in a Bathory project, were you?
I gotta be honest, I was not expecting opera to come up in this episode. However, Swedish opera participating in metal is not the most surprising thing in the world.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Opera. It's a beautiful thing. Under the Sign of the Black Mark really is a truly special album. According to author Daniel Eckeroth, who wrote the indispensable book Swedish Death Metal, quote, "Even by Bathory's standards, this was a masterpiece, on par with both Bonded by Blood and Rain in Blood. The songs were perfected, and the sound more atmospheric and uncanny than before. Bathory were now the most extreme and one of the very best metal bands out there. They sure were, Danny boy. They sure were. Hell, we got the first of a number of songs in which Bathory quote from the classical repertoire, with Quorthon layering Chopin's March Funèbre, that's Funeral March to you and me, into the epic Call from the Grave. It's all so frickin' cool. Let's celebrate this titanic masterpiece via yet another listening break. One can never have too many Bathory listening breaks. This time, we'll look in on the supremely catchy Woman of Dark Desires. Enjoy the pitch-perfect black metal while you can, folks. When we return, things are going to begin to change a little bit.
The Dead Incident.
He didn't like the sacrificed guinea pig head impaled on an upside-down cross with nailed eyes that I thought smelled so nice.
Per Dead Olin. Bathory Fanzine number 5, 1990.
Sigh. This is why we can't have nice things, John. Because weirdos always gotta co-opt our evil music making and make it all weird. John, do you happen to remember our dearly departed good pal, Dead, from the HM 101 Norwegian black metal episode?
Not even a little bit.
Oh, that's so on brand for you. Remember he used to like to carry around the dead, decaying bird corpse and sniff it before he went on stage? He'd bury his clothes underground so they'd be like gravy.
I don't think we've ever talked about that.
Fuck you! Well, anyway, Dead is making a brief cameo herein as well, as in 1987 he did, indeed, send Quorthon a demo tape, a letter, and an impaled guinea pig head. John, are you surprised that no one has yet sent us any desecrated animal remains?
Do not ask for that. Do not put that out into the world. Do not request this nonsense. These freaks are real. They will send you shit if you ask for it. Do not do that.
I'm not requesting. That would be terrible. Terrible. I find it a little odd. Maybe slightly disappointing. Whatever. Anyhow, Quorthon was not pleased, and Dead was told, under no uncertain terms, to kindly fuck off and never, ever contact him again.
A note on unreleased projects.
Over the years, Quorthon worked on a few different projects that were either never released, were later repurposed into material for other projects, or were eventually belatedly released either in whole or in little teeny bits. Probably the most significant example of this occurred between Under the Sign of the Black Mark and its eventual follow-up, Blood, Fire, Death. After the release of Under the Sign, Quorthon began working on a planned double LP project, tentatively titled Valhalla. Much of this material eventually became the 1996 album Blood on Ice. More on that later. A similar process would precede the release of the album Hammerheart, with Quorthon first spending time working on an unreleased extreme metal project entitled Requiem, which should not be confused with the eventual 1994 album of that same name, as they are not the same thing. Other than the song Crawl to the Cross, none of this earlier Requiem session material has ever been released. Bummer.
Part 5, Bathory in Transition, Blood, Fire, Death.
Yes! Blood, Fire, Death was my first Bathory album, and it is so wonderful. An absolute masterpiece. Blood, Fire, Death has one foot still in the black metal aesthetic that Bathory were known for, but the other squarely planted in a newly developing subgenre of Quorthon's very own creation, Viking metal. One can tell something new is up just by looking at the album's cover, which is an image of the 1872 painting The Wild Hunt of Odin by Peter Nikolai Arbo. And this new musical style is front and center on the bookend tracks, the epic, sweeping A Fine Day to Die, and the concluding title track. John, I put A Fine Day to Die on your playlist. Now, what did you make of this early iteration of Viking metal, Bathory?
So, in a welcome change of pace from the earlier music, this does at least have sections. Now, unfortunately, to accomplish that, the song is over 8.5 minutes long, which is perhaps too much.
Or perhaps too little. You could argue too little.
Well, again, he hasn't changed his style of singing, so there is still a tremendous amount of work put in on unintelligible text. But there is contrasting sections. There are some different moods. It's much less driving and aggressive than the earlier stuff. This is sort of like slow and heavy and sort of like thudding music as opposed to the more thrashy earlier stuff. And it's too long.
All right. Well, also, importantly, this was the first Bathory album to come with band photos. So we kind of, sort of, at least theoretically, have a genuine band here. Sort of. Ish. John, could you read us the official credits for the Blood, Fire, Death album lineup?
Quorthon. Acoustic and electric guitars, percussions, programming, effects, and all vocals. Vronth. Drums and cymbals. Kothar. Bass.
3 dudes! A band! A real honest-to-goodness band. Right? Well, Vronth was originally drummer Paul Lundberg, who had also collaborated with Quorthon on Under the Sign of the Black Mark. Whether or not he played drums on the Blood, Fire, Death sessions is uncertain, and from this point on we can just consider the names Vronth and Kothar simply to be placeholders, meaning some dudes who may or may not have actually existed and may or may not have recorded with the band. As Metal Archives puts it, quote, Vronth/Kothar was a name used by various musicians who performed on Bathory albums. It's pretty mysterious, no?
Sure.
You're just used to this level of mystery. It's like where you live, right?
I mean, you could call it mystery. You could call it inane bullshit. You could call it some sort of weird desire to be removed from the public eye as a public artist. That is honestly the thing I would respect the most, having pseudonyms to maintain a level of anonymity as you are a performer. It makes a certain degree of sense to me as a relatively private person. I don't care what their names are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you and Quorthon and company might have gotten along. You're all misanthropists. I mean,
I'm just catching a lot of attacks on today's episode.
It's my passive aggressiveness after you started dissing Bathory in the early going.
I don't like this music, Eric. The entire genre to which this podcast is dedicated is not music I particularly enjoy. How many years have we been doing this for? You've got to be used to it by now.
So you describe yourself as a fan?
God damn it.
Okay. All right. Well, Blood, Fire, Death provides us with our very last chance, ever really, to hear Bathory doing the traditional black metal thing. I simply can't pass up the opportunity to present Bathory in transitional Viking metal mode. It's just too good. Folks, it's a fine day to die. As such, let's listen to the song of that same name by way of transition. Pause the podcast, click the link, and get ready, because a fierce chill breeze is blowing in from the north, and things are going to get even more Viking when we return.
One man rode the way through the woods down to Asa Bay, where dragon ships had sailed to sea more times than one could say. To see with own eyes the wonder people told of from man to man, the God of all almightiness had arrived from a foreign land.
There are many bands that do one thing really, really well. I would present, say, AC/DC as Exhibit A. Bathory, however, were not that type of band. Or, more truthfully, Quorthon was not that type of artist. He had always hated Christianity, but at a certain point he realized that Satan was just another stupid Christian construct, and that he really needed to find other ways to better express his disdain. And so he turned to history, myth, and mead.
Part 5. Viking Metal Bathory. April 23rd, 1990. Bathory release Hammer.
Like many, I cut my teeth on black metal Bathory and will forever have a soft spot for those albums. However, that having been said, I do think that Hammerheart is quite possibly the greatest album that Quorthon ever made. It is a true blue masterpiece, and, excepting a bit of earlier Manowar material, the founding oral document of the entire Viking metal subgenre. John, assuming we're keeping track, this means that Quorthon is the primary artist responsible for the creation and perfection of count 'em, two significant heavy metal subgenres. That's pretty impressive for one lonely Swedish oddball, no?
Sure, we can give him credit for that.
All right. I'll stop being so passive-aggressive. That was nice. You're a good man. Hammerheart marked the closest Bathory ever got to major label distribution, as it was released via Noise Records, a German label with substantially more reach than Blackmark. The album is once again credited to Quorthon with his theoretical pals, Kolthar and Vronth. However, all the songs herein are steeped in Scandinavian myth and history, and the musical language is drastically altered to fit the epic scope of the lyrical content. This includes Quorthon's singing style, which, for better or worse, is much more traditional/clean than ever before. John, how did you feel about Quorthon's switch from black metal shrieks to his not always perfectly in tune, clean singing style?
I'm sorry. Are we making the assertion that the singing heard on the one track you gave me from Hammerheart is clean singing?
Yeah, that's totally clean singing. It's got distinct pitch. It's not clean meaning like operatic or anything. It's kind of like clean like Kurt Cobain's singing is clean. Let's put it that way. But when we're talking about like extreme metal growls and stuff, we're talking about essentially rhythmic singing that's not really traditionally pitched.
I suppose in the sense that you can more so understand the words. It is cleaner, but the tone is still horrendous.
You suck!
I actually fucking love Quorthon's performance on this album.
Of course you do. You like hideous things.
It's true. I'm not going to refute that. I do indeed. And if this is hideous, well, damn it, guilty as charged. Anyhow, this brings us to one of Bathory's greatest songs, and also their only music video, One Road to Asa Bay. John, I, of course, included this stone classic on your playlist. What were your thoughts on the mighty One Road to Asa Bay? And do keep in mind, before you answer, that I will gladly destroy you and everything you love if you answer incorrectly.
Okay, so remember like 4 minutes ago when I was annoyed at the 8.5 minute song?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so this one's 10.5 minutes long. and somehow less musically diverse.
It's definitely more of a traditional ballad. It really is just verse after verse after verse. Yeah.
Yeah. And so while we can now kind of understand the words that he is singing, still not particularly interested in them.
So passionate. And the story of Christendom coming and slaying the Vikings with their stupid Christ stuff.
I gotta be honest, Eric. So I listened to this entire playlist this morning while I was doing my daily workout, which was a lovely bike ride. Pretty much tuned out everything he said. Didn't process a single word of it. And this is coming from the guy who primarily cares about lyrics.
God damn it! Well, I appreciate your candor. Thank you. I don't hate you forever. Really. Don't hate you. Passionately. The video was actually a bit of a clusterfuck, in that Quorthon paid for the filming out of pocket, then left the country to do a European promo tour. When he got back to Sweden, he discovered that the filmmaker had absconded with all of the money and all of the footage except for a raw pilot that had been edited together as proof of concept. That pilot, alas, is all we have. That said, as a media document of monumental historical importance, and also a great fucking song, that's what we're going to watch. It's time for our one and only Bathory video break, folks. Pause the podcast, pull over your vehicle, and sob alongside me and John as we watch the story of Christendom pissing all over Scandinavian history and tradition in the name of Jesus Christ.
June 29th, 1991. Bathory release Twilight of the Gods.
This is an amazing album, but things do begin getting a bit complicated in Bathory world for a while at around this time. The band was dropped by Noise Records, who had been utterly unprepared for their new Viking metal direction. Oops. Additionally, the much-beloved Dump that was Heaven Shore Studio, where every prior Bathory album aside from The Return had been recorded, was no more. Also, Boss, who had worked so closely with Quorthon on all the recordings up to this point, was now working in Germany, and so had no involvement with the Twilight of the Gods recording process. Quorthon was pretty much on his own. His sole collaborator this time around was engineer Rex Glisson. And so, these were the conditions under which Quorthon, who had taken to steeping himself in a rich mix of classical music and Germanic and Nordic mythology and history, wrote and recorded the sixth Bathory album. What could possibly go wrong, John?
Well, I mean, it's always good to isolate oneself and just focus on really, really niche things that tend to be filled with themes of violence and death. That usually always goes well. So I think it's going to be great, right?
Nothing, John! Nothing went wrong! Not a thing! Damn it! I love this album. Love it. Much as The Return did with early Bathory's black metal sound, Twilight of the Gods doubles down on the Viking metal sound of Hammerheart. I will admit to having some questions about Quorthon's decision to turn a sung version of Jupiter from Gustav Holst's The Planets into the closing track Hammerheart. But all in all, this is a fabulous album and another Viking Bathory classic. No listening break this time around, but I recommend Under the Runes if you're looking to dip your toe into the especially epic sweep of Twilight of the Gods.
Part 6. The 90s were a tough time to be a classic metal band. A. Breaking the Band.
Twilight of the Gods was the first Bathory album not to end with their standard outro, The Winds of Mayhem. As such, it would seem that Quorthon had intended the album, and particularly its final track, the aforementioned Hammerheart, as something of a farewell to fans. It was also at this time that all of the chaos that we addressed on our absolutely classic HM101 Black Metal episode was taking place over in Norway. Quorthon was actually questioned at one point by Norwegian police, leading him to further disassociate himself with that scene. He was burned out, uninspired, and in need of a break. Fucking 90s, man.
B. What to do when you're burnt out, Part 1.
Quorthon wasn't feeling new Bathory material after Twilight of the Gods, so instead he began to assemble the 3 Jubileum volumes. These are collections of Bathory's classics and obscurities originally intended as a celebration of the band's 10th anniversary. Volume 1 was released on October 3rd, 1992, and Volume 2 on the actual official 10th anniversary of the founding of the band, March 16th, 1993. Volume 3 came out considerably later and was released in August of 1998. These are probably just for Bathory completists, but the rare stuff is totally indispensable for Bathory nerds such as myself.
C. What to do when you're burnt out, Part 2.
In the 90s, Quorthon released 2 very idiosyncratic solo albums. On September 27th, 1994, he released the Grungy Album. And on June 17th, 1997, he released an eclectic alt-rock double album, Purity of Essence. Both of these are actually pretty fucking great. I do think Purity of Essence, unfortunately, ended up as something of a dumping ground for all of the non-Bathory material Quorthon had written, rather than as a fully refined, cohesive album, but it still does have tons of excellent stuff on it. John, I included Oh No No from Album on your playlist. What did you think of Quorthon's quirky explorations into the world of 90s grunge?
I mean, this definitely sounds like an entirely different musical project. I mean, clearly he has been the driving force behind all of this, but this just sounds like completely out of left field, something totally different, not in line with everything previously discussed and heard on this episode.
Yeah, it's absolutely a totally different thing. It sort of shows us that Quorthon had a lot of music inside of him that he wanted to get out and felt a little bit restricted by the Bathory label, because even though that project was pretty diverse in and of itself, I don't think he could have done this under the name Bathory.
Yeah, probably too much cowbell, but it was the 90s, so maybe it's excusable.
I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
I think so. I think that's fair. I think this song's incredible. I absolutely love it. It's very much of its time. It's very much a mid-90s grunge song, but a really good one. And I think our listeners deserve the chance to hear a bit of this rather esoteric Bathory-related material for themselves. And so here's your chance, folks. For our next listening break, we present an opportunity to hear some of the other sounds Quorthon had banging about in that big, beautiful brain of his. Pause the podcast, click the link, and enjoy the excellent Oh No No from Quorthon's 1994 solo release, Album.
D. B. Thrashery, Requiem, and Octagon.
Bathrashery. It's pretty good, John. Your wit knows no bounds.
You are complimenting yourself. You wrote this entire thing.
I'm a fucking genius.
You started laughing at your joke before it even finished.
Good. It's very good. We now get to the return of Bathory in the mid-90s. For the record, people love to dunk on these 2 albums. Possibly, this is because it was at this point that Quorthon stopped innovating and started just making music that he felt like making. Or possibly it is because the production is really quite shitty on both of these albums. Still, to my mind, even quote-unquote bad Bathory is pretty good. And while Requiem, released on November 14, 1994, and Octagon, released May 17, 1995, might be bad Bathory, they're both good albums and well worth examination. And yes, it was apparently Quorthon who discovered the magically fucking awful drum sound that Lars Ulrich would eventually use for his snare on Saint Anger, as featured oh so prominently on Octagon. Still, if you, like me, enjoy Eurothrash by bands like Creator and Sodom, I think you'll find a lot to like on these albums. Tell them HM101 sent you.
E. May 27th, 1996, Bathory released Blood on Ice.
Blood on Ice rules! People who dismiss later 90s Bathory are totally missing out, and this is but one example thereof. It is a concept album and is based on a mix of folklore, Wagner's Ring Cycle, and a story by Conan the Barbarian creator Robert E. Howard. This project saw Quorthon refining and completing material that had been begun back in 1988, during those Valhalla sessions we mentioned earlier. It is a return to the Viking metal idiom. Songs such as the title track or The Wood Woman are top-flight Bathory, and all fans should definitely check this bad boy out. Great stuff.
Part 666, The Twilight of Bathory.
Land of unforgiving winter, cold, clad in white, under a dark, gray sky, silent, wind whispers, pale sun of gold, from far up high, endless forests, lakes of water, dark, misty mountains, where giants sleep, Nordland. Lyrics get pretty fucking good, don't you think?
If only we could understand them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding. I know at this point we can understand them. Destroyer of Worlds.
Could you say that with more feeling?
There was feeling.
I know, it wasn't the right feeling. Imagine that it's Vance McBurger saying it.
Destroyer of Worlds. Can't tell me that's not what Vance McBurger sounds like.
As he's running around with a burger in each hand. In his Vans. It would be over 5 years before Bathory would release another album of new material following Blood on Ice. At last, on October 9th, 2001, unto a world still reeling from the traumatic events of the previous month, the aptly named Destroyer of Worlds was unleashed. For some reason or another, Destroyer of Worlds seems to have something of a poor reputation amongst Bathory fans. At least some of this may be due to the inclusion of a song about ice hockey. John, what do you think about songs about sports?
It feels bizarre for this band.
Yeah.
But not bizarre for Swedish musicians. It seems natural, in fact.
Yeah, I'm sure Quorthon loved ice hockey. I mean, he's known to have enjoyed it. He was writing what he knew and what he felt like writing.
I mean, let's be honest. By 2001, metal was dead, so he was grasping at straws.
He's such a fucking idiot. I have so much to teach you. Stay tuned for season 6.
6? Didn't we just finish 4?
That's what I'm saying. 2001, dude.
Oh, God.
Wherein the ragged, decaying corpse of John will be decomposing in front of our very eyes. It's going to be great. Well, for the record, said song, Sudden Death, isn't terrible, but I suppose that it also isn't Bathory's finest moment. Still, overall, Destroyer of Worlds is great. I think it's another undervalued gem within Bathory's catalog. Lake of Fire and White Bones are stone classics, and really all of the material here is quite good. Occasionally, even delving into sound worlds not too far removed from classic black metal Bathory. We also get to hear Quorthon musically paraphrase both Holst, again, and also the traditional Gregorian Dies Irae. That's fun, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Anyhow, speaking of Bathory's catalog, the final release prior to our big finish was Catalog, with a K. A not especially interesting career-spanning collection of previously released songs which came out on August 1st, 2002. Okay, John, this is it. Big finish time.
Our big finish, Nordland 1 and 2, and the end of Bathory.
One of the truly magnificent final acts in all of music history was that of David Bowie, who released his spectacular final album, Black Star, on the day of his 69th birthday, January 8, 2016. He then died just 2 days later. Now that is a big finish. The heavy metal equivalent can be found via Quorthon's two mighty career-capping Nordland epics. Both albums are stone masterpieces and mark a truly extraordinary return to full-throated Viking metal glory. Nordland 1 was released on November 18, 2002, while Nordland 2 was released on March 31st of 2003. Sadly, Quorthon would be dead less than a year after the release of Nordland 2. Before we discuss Quorthon's ascension to Valhalla, we must celebrate the majesty of these final two Bathory albums via a listening break. Both volumes are chock full of picturesque, beautiful imagery and exquisite music, but the title track, Nordland, from Volume 1, is probably as good a place to get a sense of this material as anywhere. If this music doesn't move your very soul, then you're probably dead. Or John. What a horrifying thought. Actually, John, what did you think of Nordland? Did you like this one?
I didn't hate this one.
I felt like if you were going to like anything on the playlist, it was going to be this.
Yeah.
It's very long.
It is very long. So this one isn't offensive to me and off-putting in the way that everything else was. So that just makes it like fine music. It's not music that particularly grabs me and makes me go, wow, this shit is awesome. I want to listen to more.
All right, I'm just going to edit that so we hear, wow, this shit is awesome. I want to listen to more. It's perfect. Perfect. Cut. All right, we're coming to the end times. Pause the podcast and take the opportunity to grab your axe and feel the power of Bathory course through you. Eagle soaring, old crow cries, this land and heaven forever tied. Quorthon's final project, however, was not Nordland 2. At the end of his life, he was, in fact, collaborating with his sister, singer Jenny Tebler, on 2 songs. A new track he had composed entitled Silver Wing, and a heart-rendingly lovely cover of the Hammerheart classic Song to Haul Up High. As if this weren't enough, in early 2003 he also recorded a very nifty cover of the Kiss classic Black Diamond for a tribute album. John, I think you and I can both agree that Quorthon was using his time both wisely and productively towards the end of his life, no?
Uh-huh.
I mean, collaborating with family and Kiss? What could be better?
I don't know. Sleep.
Alas, something that was not known at the time about the always mysterious Quorthon was that he suffered from a congenital heart defect. This would prove to be his undoing. While sources disagree on the actual date of his death, with some listing it as June 3rd, 2004, and others as June 6th, an official announcement came on June 7th. Thomas Burhe Forsberg, our beloved Quorthon, had died in his sleep from heart failure in his Stockholm apartment. He was just 38 years old. John, this makes me sad. Does it make you sad?
No. People die. It's okay. He did good things, or he did things that people liked. So, good for him.
You're saying he sucked the very marrow from life.
Sure.
We've gotten to spend a lot of time with Quorthon today. It's been nice, but now he is gone. The music, however, lives on. Let us offer hails and tribute to this extraordinary body of work with one final listening break. We'll hear Quorthon's collaboration with his sister via their lovely version of Bathory's Song to Haul Up High. Pause the podcast and click on the link this one last time. John and I will be back on the other side, clinging to each other for strength, to conclude this epic sojourn into the life and times of Quorthon and Bathory.
A son, a brother, a friend, a unique artist has been taken from us in June 2004. Ace Quorthon's family and the Black Mark crew hereby thanks all of you who made time for leaving condolences, callings, letters, flowers, lyrics, paintings, and all kind of well-thought support at this hard time. It is a true comfort. It is helping us to go on, somehow. It's fine to know that Bathory's Horde is still the best. We hope for your understanding that we do not have much to say these sad days.
That message, signed Börje Forsberg and Claudia and the family of Ace Quorthon Forsberg, officially announced Quorthon's death to the world. But this was far from the final tribute to his legacy.
On Saturday, August 28th, 2004, principal members of the Norwegian black metal scene gathered to show their respect via a set titled A Tribute to Quorthon at the Norwegian Hole in the Sky Music Festival. Members of Immortal, Emperor, Gorgoroth, Enslaved, Dark Throne, Satyricon, and more paid tribute to their fallen hero.
On April 11th, 2005, the Jenny Tebler single, featuring Tebler on vocals and Quorthon playing all accompanying instruments, was released. It was dedicated to his memory.
On June 6th, 2006...
That's 666 to you and me, John.
Black Mark released In Memory of Quorthon, 1966 to 2004. A set consisting of 3 CDs and 1 DVD celebrating the legacy of Quorthon's work.
And so on and so forth. We could go on, but then John would kill me, and I'd probably be forced to wonder who would release the In Tribute to Eric box set. Not John, probably, right?
Probably not.
I will note that as recently as 2024, the Superstar Collective, Blood, Fire, Death, a tribute to Quorthon and the music of Bathory, featuring members of Watain, Enslaved, Mayhem, Aura Noir, and Emperor, was still hitting the festival circuit with live all Bathory sets. John, I think it's fair to say that Quorthon's life and work made a significant impression on us heavy metal folk, don't you?
That seems to be fair.
Mm-hmm. As our final bit of epilogue, I will sadly note that Börje Boss Forsberg, the man who helped to make all of this possible, died on Thursday, September 14th, 2017. With him, the Black Mark website also died, leaving Quorthon's legacy, ever after, in the hands of us, the fans. John, I do hope that we've done that legacy some justice today. What do you think?
I think you have. I think I'll forgo taking any claim for that.
All right, fair enough. Well, you were here.
I was present.
It's got to count for something. You've been marked present. Thanks to Quorthon for the extraordinary body of work, and thanks again to beloved Patreon member Quorthon100, aka Kenichiwa Jeffrey McDusty, aka Ken, who gave us the much-needed push to do this thing. And thanks to all of you for listening. John, I assume that some of those listening might be interested in learning how they can support this odd little show of ours. So before we get out of here, Mike, could you tell them how that's done?
If you'd like to show your support for the Heavy Metal 101 podcast, you can do so by rating, reviewing, or sharing our episodes, all of which is much appreciated. You can also sign up for our Patreon.
Just $3 per month for exclusive content and the ability to suggest an episode topic, like Ken did.
The link is in the episode notes.
You should also always feel free to reach out to us via either social media or email. You can find those links in the episode notes as well. We absolutely love hearing from our esteemed listeners. I need more cool people to talk about Bathory with, so reach on out. John, it's been a long and wild ride. Thanks for taking it with me. Any last thoughts before we step away until the fall?
Until the fall?
Until the fall!
Oh my goodness, no, I have nothing to add.
All hail John! All hail Bathory. We'll see all of you again real soon for season number 5. Later! those who cried aloud, but whose tears were never heard, for questioning one almighty Father of a heavenly distanced world. Beloved, thee who submit the holy writings assured, the golden cross stained with innocent blood, but stands yet 1,000 heavenward, burning naked but smiling, not full of fear but pride, knowing death alone could cleanse them, of the reasons for which they all die, for all those who died, for all those whose great beauty stirred their torches to rage, and for all those whose great ugliness did sin, for all those who cried aloud in vain for mercy on the rack, who were dying for mercy on the rack, not dying ashamed, not ashamed.